right, so welcome everybody. Sorry about the slight delay there. Let's just give people a couple of minutes to get in here if they've been lingering in the waiting room before we get started. Lovely to see people flowing in here for this very special event or webinar, if you will, for being a gay dad to surrogacy. Something that's very close to my heart, not only because I do work here, but also because I am a gay dad for surrogacy. So I'm always excited to speak to this topic and share with you guys my experiences, but obviously also listen into your experiences. So I hope that we can help each other and share experiences, fears, positive, negative approaches of this specific journey in terms of being a gay dad in this process. Until the last couple of people join in, you can ask questions throughout this webinar. So I think there's a Q&A button somewhere on your screen, depending on where you are. So you can use that to just pop in a question or two at any time during this call, and we can get to those at the end. I might not have time to jump out of the presentation and back in, but I will get to them in the end, I promise. And also encourage you to leave like feedback for other people that are on this webinar, about your experiences, anything you can think of. This journey is a lot about support, and it's not only an agency to IPs support, it's also support to each other as intended parents, as parents through this journey, as gay dads, taking part of communities out there. At Hatch, we have a gay intended parent support meeting each month or bi-monthly. So that's also something that's great. So I really try to get immersed in that community. There's a lot to learn about this. And sometimes being a gay parent or parents through surrogacy is a bit hard to grasp in the beginning. You might have friends who've been through that or not. That always looks different. But yeah, immerse yourself in those opportunities and share your stories with people because they are very useful, trust me. Okay, well, let's jump in. And if anybody wants to join us while we are doing that, they can. I see we have some people coming in, but that's fine. All right, I'll try to share my screen. I hope that you can all hear me well. I tend to scream in my AirPods or whatever they're called. So sorry if that's the case. But please do let me know if you can hear me well or if you can't hear me rather, so I can fix that if there's an issue. All right, so these are some of the amazing gay dads and intended parents that either work here or have been through this journey with Hatch. So we just love to show these couples in this case, even though we have plenty of single dads out there as well, gay dads that work with our program. But these are some of our team members, me and my husband here, a colleague of mine, Matt, and his husband, etc. And of course, our agency president, Greg, and his husband, who actually just today had their second baby boy through surrogacy. So we just got an update from them on the Teams channel. So we're all very excited for them. So this is a bit of, some of us here. I mean, the agency, we've all been through this ourselves in terms of the staff. When it comes to the guys here, we've all been through that process and we're all gay dads. So that's all about that kind of sharing with experiences, being a part of the community is really important for us. So just wanted to show you a couple of very amazing pictures of those gay dads to be proud of. So we are going to speak about a couple of different things here. We will do a short introduction on Hatch and PFCLA, our clinic, very briefly. We'll not spend much time on that. And then we will speak a little bit about a schedule to fatherhood for gay dads. So I'll show you a little bit of a timeline of how a journey can look. And then I want to go through the step-by-step process, but I want to focus more on what are potential additional considerations for gay dads doing this journey. It could be anything from the embryo creation stage or matching, etc., with the surrogate, that is. So I just want to go through that step by step. How does the journey work? What are these steps? And what should we as gay dads think about in additional to, what's normal, if you will, whatever normal means. And then I would love for you to chime in if you have any other considerations, like, me and my husband thought about this, or that, or I myself as a prospective gay dad, a single, want to share this experience, please do chime in. I would love to share that with everybody at the end. I don't believe you can see each other's Q&A, like the questions you put in or that, so feel free to do that, and I'll just share a little bit at the end. And then I'm happy to talk a little bit about what my experience is being a gay dad through surrogacy. I mean, like I said, you might know gay dads through surrogacy already. It's great. Speak to them, pick their brains, do all of that. But I'll also share a bit of my perspectives if that's useful. I've already presented myself here. So I am the international manager of this agency and our clinic actually as well. We have an in-house clinic, which is very unique, but we can talk about that later. More importantly, I'm a two-time father to surrogacy and egg donation with my husband. So we have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So that's why I look so tired. That's why this slide isn't the greatest either. So it's really revealing my flaws today, but we're proud of who we are, right? That's what we should be doing as gay dads and prospective gay dads. So very briefly about Hatch and PFCLA. So Hatch and Pacific Fertility Center are actually today part of the same company structure. So we are basically an agency that's been around for about 35 years and a clinic who's been around for about 30 years. And a couple of years back, we joined forces to create something very unique, which is called the Peace of Mind program. Sorry about that. I was at the Lady Gaga concert in Manchester last week, and my voice is not repaired since then. So this combination, the Peace of Mind program, we decided to merge that together for a couple of different reasons, which we don't have to go through all of them now. But a lot of it has to do with coordination between the agency and clinic, which can be more or less smooth in terms of working with a separate agency or clinic, which usually falls down more to the intended parents to take care of that coordination. Financially, we lack transparency in this journey, and we just wanted to fix that. So having both companies under our control, we can really set down fixed fee programs that includes, egg donation, surrogacy, IVF, genetic testing, etc. Like really building a program that's not only transparent but also robust in terms of what it covers, and we are in control on both ends. But the most important part also is the medical part. Having doctors in-house is an amazing, amazing thing to be able to have. As an agency, we are not medically trained. We don't have medical doctors usually. We have literally 5 double board certified IVF physicians to assist us in every step of the journey. So from surrogate application, where we do medical records review with the doctors, uterus lining assessments, until we have a pre-approval, which takes us 48 hours because our doctors have already pre-approved records and we can kick them in the butt a little bit as we are one company. To success with medical screenings, with passing medical screenings for surrogates, which is about 98%, which is amazing, and other stats of that kind. So like this really gives us this opportunity to focus on highly medically qualified candidates while the agency focuses on that, clearing surrogates in other aspects like happy, healthy, great life stability, no financial issues, no criminal backgrounds, like the other screenings we want to do. And this builds a great kind of starting point of the journey where we focus on both those softer sides of emotional journey, etc., but also that medical oversight and supervision, which is amazing. And this is just a little bit about Hatch, how many years of experience we have, how many happy, healthy birds so far. Like the best time of the workday is absolutely to get an email with the baby picture from intended parents. That is immensely satisfying and great. We're also the first egg donor agency in the United States, which is kind of cool. So we do actually run the largest egg donor database in the United States. That experience brings a lot of insight into donor screenings, and then not only if donors are qualified, but also how we treat the donor as surrogate. Like really having that extra personal touch is important. So I feel like we have a great rapport with that after 35 years of doing that. Success rates in terms of having a child through our program. And a couple of other small details there about Hatch. Okay, as promised, not spending too much time there. You can all check that out online. But let's talk a little bit about the schedule to fatherhood for us gay dads. And I mean, this schedule can look the same for anybody pursuing egg donation and surrogacy, not only gay dads. So we'll focus a bit more on that specific of us going through that journey later. But I still think that this is kind of a nice way to visualize the journey itself. We might be in very different stages of this journey, but I think this gives a great overview, even if you're more knowledgeable or if you just kind of start out research. In terms of the journey, there's the surrogacy part, egg donation part, and the clinical part. So when you go through this, sometimes you'll be advised to create embryos first and then start with surrogacy. In reality, with most of our clients, they would actually go through with this at the same time. So they would focus on egg donation at the same time as they're on the surrogacy match list. So while they're doing, starting to search for the donor, they're matching with their donor, screening, going through legal, retrieving eggs, creating embryos, etc., they're steadily moving forward in the surrogacy timeline of the match of a surrogate. And this is a very good way if you are in a bit more of in a rush, even though we always try to bring intended parents back to like the qualitative approach of the journey. But if you are a bit more time sensitive, it really does save you a ton of time. Like egg donation can take anywhere from about 4 months up to 6 to 7 months. I even have intended parents who are ready to match them. They're still looking for the perfect donor, whatever that is. So it tends to take longer than you might believe. So being on that match list, moving forward while you're focusing on that and knowing that you're so much closer to your match is a great idea. Unless you financially feel like, that's all great, but I have to span this out in different steps, then I think it absolutely makes sense to start with egg donation first, create your embryos, and then look into surrogacy whenever you're financially ready to do that. This is a big financial investment in addition to emotional investment and time investment. So that makes total sense. So whatever works for you, this is not a one journey fits all. Everybody's different, backgrounds are different, expectations are different, and we should respect that. But with that said, you can move forward with that at the same time. So you sign up with an agency. You usually sign up with the clinic quite soon as well. At least the recommendation is that, because you can have your doctor be, going through your testing and screening. You can do your semen deposit, so everything is ready when you have a donor match. But also so the doctor can give you advice on who's the best donor, right? And give you that kind of back and forth on donor profiles, etc. When you match with the donor, she's typically sent to the clinic for an in-clinic screening. This happens after pre-approval by the doctor. She goes there, does a screening. That also sometimes includes a genetic carrier screening, and that's also done on intended parents on the sperm source, so that you can see that you're genetically compatible. We all carry these mutations recessively that we can affect the child. So that's something you want to avoid in the donor. So sometimes donors go to the clinic and they're actually not a great fit with you. So then you would actually go to another donor. And sometimes that costs you money again. You go through additional process. In other programs, like in our Peace of Mind program, we just cover that cost for that again. We move ahead one more time. But if everything does look good, you go to a legal contract with the donor. So you have your attorney, she has her separate attorney. She will then do medications, and then we will retrieve the eggs and use the semen that we've tested and prepared before to create the embryos. And after that, we do something called pre-implantation genetic testing. This is actually something that Hatch requires to have at least 2 PGTA tested embryos before surrogate match. But it can look different with other agencies and clinics. But this avoids things like, genetic issues that might lead to abortion terminations, etc. It just makes surrogates generally more comfortable as well. So we stick to that. And then basically you're ready to match. So usually about 8 months in, we introduce you to your matching team. Before that, you work with your intended parent relationship manager. It's a unique role that we have to take you from sign up to the actual match itself. So we hand you over to the match specialist at about 8 months to do your interview with the match specialist, and then have your official match after that when we have a suitable surrogate for you. The matching time can vary depending on what do you want as an intended parent. Everybody's very different, and even the ones that say I don't have any requirements, they will have requirements or specifications when the day comes, and which is fine. You should really be open with us about what do you want in a surrogate match. We want you to have the best possible journey, and that requires communication. But that can also make the matching time longer. Let's say you're minimizing the pool to a certain state only, or adding on several requirements that are kind of minimizing that pool. It's going to take us longer to identify that person. While if you have a more open profile, you're more open to different geographies and different kind of backgrounds, etc., then we can probably do that a bit more tightly. But when the match occurs, we'll talk about how that works later. We do a surrogate medical screening. We actually did some of these things already with our clinic, like a uterus lining assessment, etc., which is great to find issues earlier rather than later, which is a very frustrating thing. My colleague Matt go through 3 surrogates before he had his official match because of medical issues. So we want to catch that earlier. So 98% of our surrogates, they pass this. We do legal contract, medications, embryo transfer. This is also heavily dependent on your clinic. What is the embryo transfer success rate, etc. But generally, you can speak to the agency about how many transfers are usually necessary for a live birth. But it's great to speak to your clinic about that as well. That's more a clinical medical success rate. And then hopefully there's 9 months of pregnancy there, and then that's a wrap, or rather that's a start, because then you have a child and it's time to do the diaper changing and all of that other work. But there's also some post-birth work when it comes to the legal aspects of things. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. But that's how the journey looks, kind of start to finish. In this example, every journey is different, right? But this gives you a great overview, I hope, in terms of how that works. And if we do have any HIV intended parents, positive intended parents, there is an additional step necessary at something called the SPAR program to schedule sperm collection, evaluation, and testing, etc., prior to signing up. And then when that is done and there's sperm frozen that's not viral, then we can have that sent to our clinic and you continue the journey in exactly the same way as anybody else. All right, I don't see a ton of questions yet, which is good, I guess, so it's clear. But if there are any, please feel free to jump in if you do have any questions, and I'll get to them at the end. Okay, well, let's break this down a little bit more step by step then. You've seen that kind of timeline. So let's talk about what do you do then in the beginning. So the first thing, obviously, you want to do is to choose a clinic and agency. I would even say test your sperm first, maybe, before even doing that, especially if you're international. Just like a simple sperm test, quality, motility, nothing fancy. Don't have them sell you a lot of fancy stuff. Just so you can kind of know that everything looks good enough in terms of that. IVF is very forgiving, right? We do intracytoplasmic sperm injection, etc., which is like singling out a great quality sperm from the microscope and using that to fertilize the egg, etc. But generally, you do want to know that there are no issues. So that's maybe the first step. But after that's done, you can choose a clinic and agency. And what should you think about when you do that is experience, number of years of experience. What are the success rates of the agency and the clinic? What expertise do they have? Meaning that an IVF clinic doesn't necessarily have to be very experienced in surrogacy. They might do a lot of, transfers to intended mothers themselves to carry and have a baby. What services do they provide? It's a very big difference in terms of, let's say, insurance. Do you have somebody reviewing the insurance details of the donor or surrogate, or is that up to you to understand yourself? Like, there's a lot of different services you don't necessarily think about that's important to inquire about. Patient service in terms of the doctor. Do you have access to your doctor? Which might sound a bit weird, but not all doctors are very face-to-face. They're more kind of the face of the clinic rather. So can you speak to your doctor whenever? Do you have your email of the doctor? Do you have the phone number of the doctor? Like, can you reach your doctor? And do you have a dedicated doctor is really important. The lab is super important. It's something we sometimes miss, especially as gay dads. I feel like we're not in tune, but as understanding about the lab as maybe straight couples who've struggled with IVF for decades or years, that the lab is a key player. So if that lab is in-house, or if that's a lab that's shared with several clinics, etc., things like that can matter as well. Success rates of the clinic and the agency, just ask what does that mean. It can be very different things, especially the clinics also. It depends on what kind of patients they take on, what kind of cases do they handle, what complexity does that bring the clinic, etc. So there's a lot of kind of misleading information that way, or it can seem misleading because you don't know the finer details of things. So that's kind of the first thing. As gay dads, right? Do they have any experience of gay intended parents? We're not abnormal creatures, right? We don't need any special treatment, but there are smaller things, as we are two sperm sources, for example. Like, does that cost us anything additional in this program versus just, those who have one sperm source? What experience does a doctor have working with gay couples? That can be cultural, not cultural, but also about how we are handled and met, right? It's not always the case, unfortunately, for us gay guys that we are met with that respect, but a doctor who has experience with gay couples might not ask the weird questions and just generally be more experienced with that. And then we talked a little bit about this, about HIV positive, not that it's very specific to gay couples or individuals. It applies to both equally. So when you find your donor, when you find your agency and your clinic, the next step would usually be to find the donor. So you can go into databases. Most of them are open. Some of them are closed, meaning that you have to either pay a cost or become a client of that agency to be able to access it. But others are open, like Hatch's database. You can go to the website, you can register cost-free. And explore a lot of these databases. Like, even, for example, if Hatch has the largest egg donor database of great egg donors, sometimes our clients, even with the all-inclusive program, they just don't find a donor they really, really like or that speaks to them in that sense. And that's fine. Like, we should not be forced to use a donor from a specific agency or clinic. Like, that makes no sense. And this is 50% of your child's genetics. Like, respect your choice in that. So explore different databases, our all-inclusive programs. You can go with another donor from another agency. We're still your IVF clinic. We're still your surrogacy agency. We take out the cost of egg donation. That still works. Like, we want to be flexible for you as much as we can. What you should be doing, though, is also identifying maybe a backup donor or two. It's not uncommon that, we find that perfect donor, we're super excited, and that's the one I'm going to go with. She's not genetically compatible with us, and we stand there with nothing again. So it's really good to be prepared. Maybe 2-3 donors in a list that you can kind of move on to should there be any issues with the first one. Matches fall through, genetics don't work out. Like, be prepared for more than just one donor match. And that's generally why you should also prepare for that timeline. Like, I know 3 to 4 months is the general thing we say about egg donation. It can be so much longer depending on that. And we do see things fall through because of different reasons. So just be prepared for that as well. Just build that patience in. Age is important to consider, and also speaking to your doctor about that. But also kind of the number of options. There are many, many options. So kind of maybe discuss with your partner if you have one, or if you don't, congratulations, it's all up to you. So kind of look at those factors maybe first, because when you do jump in there, it can be a bit overwhelming. It's easier to filter through of what you actually want, basically. And we only do fresh egg retrievals here at Hatch. Like, our donor database is fresh egg donors. So that's what we focus on, basically. So I have a quick question. I actually can't pull it up at the same time, so that's even better. Any recommendations for clinics to test sperm? No specific recommendation. Depending on where you are, I'm sure there are fertility clinics around you that can do that. So it doesn't have to be any specific one. And like I said, don't have them sell you anything fancy. Like, you need a simple sperm test, motility and quality, like movement, etc. That's it. That's what you need. So you can go anywhere to do that. You can also come to our clinic to do that in LA if you're local. If not, it's a long flight to do a sperm test, so you can probably do it locally. But we're there if you need us. So for gay dads then, so things to consider a little bit is about who's going to be actually providing the sperm. For some couples, that's obvious. It's both of us, right? But there might be considerations of, sperm quality, the success of the journey, different things of that kind. And also, when you're using 2 sperm sources, like, how does that impact your search for the donor, right? Because then there are 2 wills in that donor, but there's also 2, maybe, there's 2 physical appearances. Like, how does that match with both of you, and other factors like that you can think about. Also, if one of you is genetically compatible with the donor, but the other one isn't, what happens then? What's the plan? Do you move forward? Do you go back to another donor? All those things are important. There can also be other things, in terms of, sometimes we have couples when one is significantly older than the other, then who's going to go first, etc. with the transfer. Maybe that person should have a bit more donor eggs, depending on sperm quality. Like, there's a lot of different considerations in that. So we've chosen the clinic and the agency. You've found your donor. Let's say you've matched, you're all excited. The third step is to create the embryos. So that comes with testing your sperm, which I recommend doing already. Then some stimulation of the donor. She will take medications for stimulating her growth of her eggs, to put it in non-medical terms. Then there's some monitoring done during that medication cycle, and then there's an egg retrieval. This is done under anesthesia, so donors are asleep, generally a very safe process. And then there is after the egg retrieval, the eggs are fertilized ASAP. So freezing eggs is something that we do not do in this program. So we do fresh egg retrieval. We fertilize the eggs with the semen. And then you culture the embryos. Fancy way of saying, let them lay, let them be still, and let's monitor their development and see which ones make it to the embryo or blastocyst stage. When it does reach that stage, usually about day 6, we test the embryos with genetic testing. So this is the pre-implantation genetic testing. It's a biopsy of the embryo that is sent to a lab to be checked for abnormalities. And then they were frozen, and we get the results back maybe 3-4 weeks after. And then we know which embryos are ready to be used, are normal, and which ones do we discard because they're abnormal in the journey. So what should you think about? Like I said, test your sperm. It feels like a mantra already in this webinar. Like I mentioned with age and sperm quality, how many eggs each will be fertilized. If you have an uneven number, or because of sperm quality of one partner, for example, or one individual, you might want to have those extra eggs go to that other person. That's something that you can consider. And then sometimes people also have the idea of sharing eggs between them, because obviously this is quite a costly process. So some couples decide to like share eggs between themselves, so they like split that cost, and there's like some synergy effects with that, of course, as well. Something to consider. It's not super common, I would say, but it's occasional. It happens occasionally. Okay, so you've had those embryos frozen ready, so basically you're ready to match with the surrogate, right? Just to talk a little bit about something very important, which is screening, because this happens before matching. So sometimes we focus so much on the matching process, but we fail to focus on what took us there, which is a very thorough, it should be a screening. But this varies from agency to agency. Like it's not regulated in that sense. So it's very variable from provider to provider. So this general sense of like, yep, all agencies do the same screening. It's all, great. It's not the case, unfortunately. So you really need that experience to screen surrogates well and put down the effort of staff and all of our effort to do that screening. Surrogates can come to an agency different ways. They can be return surrogates, which is about over 75% of our surrogates in terms of like how many return, over 75%. Online recruitments, other methods, it can be events and other online advertising for having surrogates apply. We really want to dive deep inside of surrogate candidates. So understanding what is your history, not only pregnancy history and delivery history, but other parts of your background and your life so far. Motivation is really important. We want this to be a great, humane journey based on human beings having a great relationship and building something amazing together. That means non-transactional. That means communication required. So we do have a couple of requirements on intended parents, which is you have to communicate with your surrogates, not optional. They really want to build that relationship and trust with you and with each other. So it's really important. So finances, speaking about money, compensation, etc., that's a part of the process, but shouldn't be between you and the surrogate. That should all be settled so you can focus on the pregnancy and the baby that is to come and each other. So we also want to do an application is usually the first step, and then followed up by an interview process that's quite extensive in terms of not only understanding who she is, but also her partner, and also educating her on how does this process work. When you're not educating people enough, they jump in with expectations and assumptions that are not correct. And that can create problems further down the line. So we're very thorough with educating intended parents, educating surrogates about what does this journey actually entail for you, so that when you do jump in, you're totally prepared for this process, and there are hopefully no surprises in that sense, so that you're prepared for this journey. And that means for the surrogates that they're on board with what's happening, and they're not getting queasy, leaving the program and jumping out of it because they've been told transparently, with respect and with appreciation for what they're doing, what this journey is all about for them. We include the partner a lot in this. If they have one, it's not just about surrogate, like criminal background checks, financial background checks, etc. also applies to that person. So it should be surrogate, partner, and actually it should also be you, because you're also very obviously pivotal part. And it's not only about protecting you and your child, of course, that's going to come from the process, but also our surrogates from people that might not be the greatest fit for them. So background checks all around for everybody, including a therapy assessment. It's really important. Something that we do, which is very different from a lot of other agencies, is that we're lucky to have our clinic in-house, as mentioned. So we have a chief medical officer called Dr. Shakian, who has 30 years of IVF surrogacy egg donation experience. When a surrogate applies to our program, we will do a medical records review from the doctor's perspective. So the doctor does that, not the agency. And this brings all of that vast experience to that, not only as looking at isolated as in surrogacy or egg donation or IVF process. With that experience to build that assessment together is really amazing. And he tells us if we're ready to move forward or not. It's a medical decision. It should be done by a medical doctor, not by agency staff. And generally, just don't let your agency control those medical decisions, because we are not doctors and medical providers. The clinic is, the doctor is, your coordinator is at the clinic. So listen to them when it comes to that. But we're lucky this way to have them here in-house, because then we can draw from their experience and really raise the bar in what we do. So we actually also perform something called a uterus lining check. which is very, very unique. We want to do this before the match, because when you send a surrogate to the clinic, usually you might find issues in terms of uterus lining not being thick enough, fibroids, polyps, etc. So we really want to perform this. And as we are a clinic as well, we can order a local, for the surrogate applicant to go to a local clinic, finish the uterus lining assessment, we can have the results, so it's independent in that way, and we have our doctor review that and ensure that we're good. And sometimes we even do a mock cycle, like actually taking medications to see, are these medications doing what they should be doing in terms of thickening the uterus lining, etc., to support the embryo transfer. So this is something that's great. And we know that going into the match later that, like, yep, she responded really great to the medications. We can get to that thickness that we want with these medications. And that's a much safer process for our intended parents to be at. So that's a little bit about the screening before matching. This is just a little bit about how a typical profile looks of a surrogate. Not that there's anything typical about surrogates. They're really amazing in that sense, but it gives you a bit of like understanding of what it is that might look like. So age-wise, mid to late 30s, average to full figure build when it comes to, body mass index, etc. We're looking at about 32 or below. Sometimes they have mainly they have high school diplomas or a junior trades school or like junior college for different trades. Usually one or more children of their own. I mean, one is a minimum requirement, so everybody has at least one child that they're currently raising themselves that they gave birth to, but they might have more children than one. History of healthy pregnancies and deliveries, of course, might seem very obvious, but very important. And we go through that in detail and also share that in the surrogate match profile, which is really important for you to understand, like, what does that history look like? Stable, happy living situation, like focused on family, herself, partner, job, house. It's really like the whatever you would call an average person, I guess, then, which doesn't exist once again, but a very stable situation. That's what we're looking for. Like, we want stability in all aspects, like home life, social life, financial situation, etc. We really want that stability. And then these are amazing women. Like, these are women that have huge hearts. Like, they really want to help somebody achieve this great thing. And that's really what brings them to surrogacy. Not everybody, of course. Like, that's why the screening exists. But the surrogate that we do have at Hatch, like, their motivation comes out of this. Like, they've sometimes known people that have gone through a really tough time, or they've heard about others that have been really struggling, and they've always felt like, I have such easy pregnancies and deliveries, etc. What could I do? Or they've actually heard of somebody who's been a surrogate and thought that sounds amazing, and they applied to the program. So that's a really important part of the journey as well. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking away the wrong spaces here. Somebody has a question. So, okay, that's a quite broad question. So let's get to that at the end. I promise to cover it. It's a great question. And let's just do that at the end, if that's okay. Okay, and some are single and some are partners. Even if they don't have a partner, it doesn't mean that it's not a great idea. We do additional assessment on support network. We have some really amazing single surrogates who do an amazing job. So sometimes some intended parents might feel more comfortable with the partnered surrogate, but a single surrogate with the right support network and the support from Hatch can be an amazing candidate still. So anything to think about here as gay dads, it's important to understand, like, do surrogates want to work with gay intended parents? And that might seem like a really weird question to ask, but the agency only has so many surrogates, right? And they're recruiting surrogates a certain way, and they're looking for certain things. So you want to make sure that surrogates with the agency are open-minded, that they really are there to help, like I mentioned, in terms of the humanitarian aspect. So they're really open to working with different kind of intended parents. Something that's really also important is to think about how comfortable you are discussing reproductive health and pregnancies. There is a lot to learn in terms of reproductive health and pregnancies in this journey. And sometimes I feel like as gay men, we're maybe not the most adept to doing that, depending on our own experiences. But you will be talking a lot about pregnancy related items, reproductive health, being in the delivery room experience of its own. It really does, it's important to be prepared for those things and really have thought through that, and maybe do some research, read a bit about how that all works and pregnancies, etc., to be more kind of armed with that knowledge going forward. And then also just considering the surrogate's partner or husband. Not sure how that relates exactly to being a gay parent, honestly, but it's something that also is important. Like, the open-mindedness of that person is also really important, because that person is going to be a huge player in this journey as well. Somebody we usually overlook sometimes in terms of like the intended parents. That person will be really important. My own experience in my surrogacy journeys is that person is pivotal for supporting the journey and the surrogate. So that person should also be considered. Okay, so you have the match now, which is great. So now it's time for embryo transfer, which is usually done with the frozen embryo transfer technique. So it's a very technical process done by your doctor, transferring the embryo into the uterus of the surrogate. So this is why uterus lining thickness, etc., is so important, because that is where the embryo will be inserted and left for hopefully to stick and then to become something that we can have a lot of joy out of. So as mentioned before, considerations when it comes to the embryo transfer, which embryo do we transfer, right? Most experienced agencies and clinics today do not do double embryo transfers in pursuit of twin pregnancies. So who goes first, right? There's both the qualitative approach of that, like age, quality of the embryo, etc. So like considering that, but also the emotional aspects of kind of who goes first. It might be a very small discussion in your relationship if you are a couple, but sometimes it's not considered enough until this point comes and it's like, oh, we have to choose that. And then that discussion that commences. Better to think about that before. So transfer succeeded, pregnancy successful, a birth has occurred. So after the birth, there is the preparation of legal documents. So establishing parentship. There is pre-birth orders where that's done more or less beforehand, and post-birth orders when there's more work to be done post-birth. But either way, there's usually some kind of legal process to prepare and establish the parentship of the intended parents. And also guarantee a safe home, return back home for some intended parents that are international. And that also includes preparing the passport for international intended parents, and also considering local laws and also state laws. Like, what does that mean for you returning back home? And especially for international intended parents returning home to your country, what does that mean in terms of preparation of documentation? What do you need from us or the legal team, from the courts, to be able to have a successful process in your home country? And that's why we work with attorneys in all countries we have basically intended parents from. We always try to identify great attorneys in those home countries so we can give those intended parents that support and that connection so they can work with them to finalize everything in their home country afterwards. I basically think I mentioned all of that now, basically. All right. So far, so good. I did see a question about for international intended parents regarding any concerns of citizenship or that process of parental establishment in the United States, which is a really, really great question. As of now, nothing has changed. There's definitely reason to keep our eyes on that ball and with our attorney partners, with the experts, to keep looking at, is there any potential change to that process? Surrogacy is state by state, right? So like when it comes to the surrogacy process, that's one part, and having citizenship in terms of the right documentation is another part. So we don't have a crystal ball. I wish we had that. That would be great. There are still decisions to be made on higher court levels, but so far there have been injunctions against that executive order and other steps taken towards that. So it's a very delicate matter. I would really recommend having a discussion with an attorney about that. And we are not legal experts, so this is not legal advice. I would really recommend speaking to an attorney about that more in depth. So we work with some of the best attorneys in the United States for this process. So feel free to reach out to me if you do need any referral. I'm happy to give you introductions to these attorneys, and they can walk you through, if any considerations today, what are they and how should you approach that subject. And some people don't even need that in terms of like completing the journey. They can just go back home anyways, and they can handle that locally. So it's not really a question of like, can I pursue surrogacy or not then? You can. It's a matter of that last leg of that. Let's see. Can you explain more about genetic compatibility? I can try. I'm not a doctor, but from my own experiences, basically what we do, there's two layers of genetic testing. So the first layer is genetic testing between the donor, egg donor, and the semen source. So this is called a genetic carrier screening. So this is usually a panel that looks for, ideally, for over 500 genetic abnormalities that we all could carry recessively. Like we all carry recessive mutations. They are not active for us, so we're not affected by them. But if we do have two recessive mutations together, they can become an active mutation in the child. So that's what we want to avoid, right? So if a donor does a genetic carrier screening, you do the same as the sperm source, there might be things that you correlate with that the doctor might say, that's a very serious health issue potentially for the child. I would recommend you move on to another donor. So that's like the first layer. The second layer is what we call the pre-implantation genetic testing. That's done on the embryos. So this is just before we freeze the embryos. We look for additionally the genetic abnormalities that are exhibited in this embryo. So this also gives us things like chromosomal count, etc. So it's just another layer of genetic testing on the embryos to ensure we're using those who exhibit normal, that are normal versus those that exhibit any abnormalities in the embryos. So those are kind of the two genetic compatibilities, and this relates to the donor, not the surrogate, if that makes sense. Let me know if that was okay. I felt like it was quite okay for non-medical doctor or for not being a doctor. If anybody has any questions about being a gay dad for surrogacy, please shoot ahead. I just tried to compile a little bit of what people usually ask me about being a gay father to surrogacy. You might not at all have to think about this. For example, the first thing, reactions, depending on where you live, you might have 0 reactions to this or more reactions. So feel free to put in any questions you might have now, because this is just what I could think of. Some people ask me about, these reactions to people understanding that we're gay dads to surrogacy and what that brings up. I've honestly never had a single bad reaction to that. I mean, what people think is another thing. And luckily enough, I can put that in the compartment of I don't care and move on. But in terms of other reactions, kind of like negative or that, I mean, most of it has been very positive. Like, obviously a bit inquisitive for sure. I mean, we should prepare for a bit of questions. And if you're very sensitive to the topic, or you feel like, it might be a bit hard to take those questions, I just try to kind of think of what is the intention of this question? Where is it coming from? If the intention seems to be very innocent, if you will, and come from a place of just curiosity and not at all from any kind of point of judgment, I try to be open about it. But my husband might have a harder time with that and be more irritated by why are we getting these questions? They're not asking a straight couple of how they got their kids. And sure, it makes sense, but I just try to kind of see where it's coming from and handle it accordingly. But overall, it's been extremely positive. It obviously depends on where you live as well, I can assume. But I've only had positive reactions to that. And even some people telling me, oh, great, you don't have an overbearing mother, which I don't even think that I agree with. But like, there's a lot of different reactions. And most of them have been positive or kind of just funny. But there are those inquisitive people that, sometimes step on your toes a bit. But if they mean well, my tendency is to just let it be. If they don't, then of course it's not a scenario, but I've never had that happen. So if you are a gay dad today, let me know and share your experiences. Doubts being gay dads, not many, but of course, there's once again the considerations of reactions when they are in school and when people understand they have 2 dads and questions from friends. But my kind of outlook for that has always been like transparency and openness with my children about that, and educating them on the process. So when they do get questions themselves, they can know what to say and they can feel confident in how that process worked out, instead of feeling like now we're being faced with these questions and I don't know how to handle those, or I don't know actually how the process went. So I just feel like transparency and openness has been my key. So I didn't really think a lot about that beforehand. But of course, we have to think about what questions our children will have from other people around us. Genetic link, we basically went with the best quality embryo approach. So what is the best quality embryo? Shoot ahead, we want a baby. And, this is expensive as it is. So let's not take any chances. Then, of course, when you have your second child, then that can come up even more then, because you have, a genetic link from the first baby with the one parent. And now you might want to think about the second parent there. So that's maybe more a question of a sibling journey more than the first child. But we just looked at embryo quality and just said shoot ahead and go with that, basically. Let's see, we have a question here. If I can answer this. This has been so useful. Love to hear that. We never know who's looking and what people need. So I really love you telling us that. Thank you so much. Do you have any advice if a family member offers to be an egg donor or surrogate? Yeah, sure. The egg donor part, somebody being a donor for you is not uncommon. Most of our clients still have a donor to choose in a donor database or whatever, but it does happen that people have a friend or a family member even that offers to be an egg donor. It's a great idea. I mean, why not? If there are, it's not black and white. So I was kind of premature with that one. Sorry. Considerations can, it's a great idea from the beginning in terms of like, that's a really beautiful thing. And that can really create an atmosphere for the child when there are all of the people that were involved in that journey are actually more around that child. assuming that that person would be more geographically or whatever involved. So it's a beautiful thing, but you also have to think about kind of both success and other emotional factors. So like, what is the age of that person? Donors are usually younger. They can provide more eggs, which leads to more embryos, hopefully. What does that mean with somebody donating? Like, what is their age, etc. Emotional factors to think about is like, that person might feel great with donating today and feeling that it's totally fine that that child is not under their care. But if they are in the vicinity of that child later, like, does that change? What are the emotional side of things? Like, really feeling comfortable and confident in that emotional side of things, especially if they don't have kids of their own yet, I think is a really important consideration. But I think it's a great idea. If it works overall, it's a really nice thing. The same goes with the surrogate. The only thing I would say that it depends on really trusting each other in that end. Like, there's so much work to be done in a surrogacy journey in terms of legal safety and medical aspects, etc. Like, that you really have to think about, are you going to run that yourself and take care of all of that, from insurance to this and that, or are you going to still rely on an agency to do that? So once again, it can be great if you really have a great process and you're really structured and organized together with this person and you can really trust this person. But it can also be a bit of a challenge to go through. So I think that there's no like right or wrong with that. It depends all on the situation at hand. I think it can be an amazing thing if it works out, and it can be really tricky and sometimes detrimental if expectations aren't aligned, and having to deal with that as two parties that also have some kind of emotional investment already because you know each other or your family, etc. That can create issues for sure as well. So not the greatest answer, no great advice, just like still speak to attorneys, still speak to doctors, still do the right steps. Like, don't skip on steps because we know each other and it's all fine. It's still important to do your due diligence. With that said, then that could be a great experience. And how nice, I mean, for somebody to offer that. That's amazing. Just educate them as well. Like, have them speak to doctors, etc. Like, don't let them go blindly into that just because you know each other. Give them the education, give them what they need to really learn about that, because you can quickly throw out, oh, I'll do that for you, and then you got to realize what it actually means. Treatment of medical staff, etc., has always been great in our experience. We've never had any issues with that. Our children, I mean, what kind of questions they have? They're not that old yet. So I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. The 1-year-old is absolutely not asking me any questions about this. The 5-year-old, still a bit too soon. With that said, we've always been very open, like I said. So like, we have, for example, a book where the whole journey is kind of from start to finish planned out with pictures, etc. It sounds very fancy. It's not. It's just like a bunch of pictures thrown in and trying to create a timeline. So maybe that's why there's lack of questions. I thought there would be more at this age, or maybe I'll just think too highly of my daughter. Like, you know, that will come later. She's still too young. But maybe this book and this openness, you know, and having a relationship with our surrogate and meeting her and you know, Zooming and also physically having, you know, gone on trips together, etc. Maybe that helps a little bit. Maybe they feel less inclined or less needy to ask questions of that kind, because it's already been kind of not discussed, but like, it's open in that sense. So I haven't had any questions yet about that. Maybe she wish it was a bit smaller, like it was more of these kind of weird questions, like, but nothing really major. But hey, ask me in 5 years when she's 10, or in 10 years when she's 15. I'm sure questions will come, but I feel like, once again, openness and, you know, transparency should be able to address most of those even before they come. And then you obviously dive deeper as the children mature. That's my outlook to it, but I'm one person over here. I have no idea exactly, but that's my approach to the journey. And this is such a weird question, but people ask a lot, like, what do they call you? Oh, you're two dads. Like, do they call you dad and dad, or like daddy and dad? Like, it can be so different. I happen to have another ethical background, so I'm from another country originally than where I live. So we use that language for me, and we use the Swedish word for dad for my husband. So that's naturally worked out. But I mean, I don't love this question, but it's asked a lot, so I included it. But if you have any great ideas or examples, let me know. All right, we got quite far in 15 minutes. You've been champions sitting here and listening to this. We still have 10 minutes if you want to ask any last questions, and I will address any last question that might be on the forum. But if you do want to chat with us, you're really welcome to reach out. Like I said, we're all gay dads here, or previous surrogates, actually. We're really happy to have a chat to educate you more on the process, how it works, what our program means, right? Like our program is one way to do this journey. There's others out there. So if you do need that guidance based on your specific situation, you can go to our website, you can fill out a form, you can email me if you want to. If you're very technically advanced, I always say at the end of this, you can use these QR codes. I wouldn't try it, but you can give it a shot. We would love to chat with you and really have the time to go deeper inside of this amazing journey, this scary journey, everything it can be. So really do feel free. We're very friendly, so don't be worried about that. I think I've answered all the questions I can see here so far. Is there any last questions? Anything last you want to just put in there before we say goodbye? This is your chance. There's no weird questions or bad questions. Only I can see them. So don't worry about that. If not, thank you so much for being here. I'll stick around until everybody's left the room. So if anybody wants to jump in with a question, I think this is the time. I hope you all learned something from this. I know, like I said, we're in different stages of research and we know more or less, but I hope everybody could pick a little bit of something out of this and learn from this experience here as well. And go to our website. There's a ton of resources there as well. If you want to look around there, like there's a lot of guides, there's a lot of just really good information to be had there. So do have a peek there, or to the clinic website as well in terms of the medical side of things. That's also really useful. All right, I see no other questions, so I will thank you so much for today. Have a great day, evening, whatever it is where you're at, and best of luck on this amazing journey. I'm excited for you wherever you are in the journey. This is one little piece of it, and I'm excited for you to become that. All right, take care, everybody. Stay safe. Bye-bye.